twice. Welcome everybody to the third Derek Arden's live web chat show of the week. Today I've got Tim Durkin with me all the way from Texas, where it's 27 degrees. But before that, I want to tell you about the speakers that we've got for next week. I've got either Patricia Fripp from San Francisco or Will Kintish from Manchester. Fripp's much better looking than Will Kintish, and San Francisco is much more sexy than Manchester, considering they have a couple of football teams that I don't particularly like up there. On Wednesday, we've got Gabrielle Gachet talking about goal setting and timeline, something really important at this point in time with the lockdown. And on Thursday, I've got Graham Jones, the internet psychologist, also the business development director at Buckingham University. So that's the first thing. And now I'm going to turn to our guest today, all the way from Texas, great friend of mine, Tim Durkin. Tim and I met when we both attended a 4-day conference at Marco Island. Those of you that know Florida, Marco Island's on the East Coast and not very far from I've forgotten where it's not very far from, but it doesn't really matter, does it? I had something there I was going to say without looking at my notes, but I'm not going to. My wife was going to come with me, but her mum was taken into hospital at 6 o'clock and we were leaving for Heathrow at 6:30 that morning. So guess she went to the hospital and I went to the airport under her telling me to go. And so that's where I met Tim. And the problem was that Tim and I were in the bar all evening, every evening, drinking beer and talking about a few stories. And Tim's a really interesting guy. So what I'm going to ask Tim to talk about today, he was a Marine in the US, and tell us what he learnt being a Marine, which I understand is the equivalent of the SAS over here. What is VUCA, which he talks about and lectures on, and some experiences from his university lecturing. And he did tell me a few things that are going on in America at the moment, so he might let a few things slip there. I don't know. He's certainly not going to tell me one or two of the things he told me about being in the Marines last night, and he made sure I wasn't recording it. So Tim, welcome from Texas. Thank you for joining us. Tim, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
All right, that better?
That's better, that's fine. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so I know it's 5 o'clock over there and I don't see anybody holding a pint, but if you were so inspired to do that, please feel free to hold a pint or a whiskey or something like that. I wish it was 5 o'clock here. I'd be joining you. Derek, I really do want to start out by saying I'm honored, and I really do feel like it is a privilege to be with you and your colleagues. Derek and I do go back to that meeting, that 4-day conference where we got a lot of material, but we made a great friendship sitting there in the bar, having pints, telling lies, scratching, burping, doing all of the things that we don't do around our wives. Anyway, when I was in the Marines, if you were to ask me, and I spent 5 years in the Marines, and you did ask me, what was the thing that I took back from the Marine Corps? They take great pride in, number one, being a Marine, mission accomplishment. But the one thing that I learned, and I applied for the rest of my life, and I will continue to do that, is leadership. Leadership in a way that is not taught anywhere else. It's taught mostly by example. I had a number of commanding officer. I ended up being an infantry platoon sergeant, but I never did deploy to war. I don't steal valor as, saying I did things that I didn't do. Most of my combat took place in the enlisted men's club when the Navy guys showed up, and we turned a bar into a gymnasium. But the whole thing about leadership was very important. I had commanding officers who always made sure that they were the last to eat. Now, it's very commonplace now to say that, but if there was no food left, then they didn't eat. The other thing is that every commanding officer went and checked on every one of his troops and got to know the person individually. And they kept an eye on you. If you were limping, obviously you didn't want to fall out. But if you were limping, it was not unlikely that the commanding officer would take you to the side and say, "What's wrong?" And you'd say, "Well, I got a little cut on my foot." He'd say, "Show me." He said, "It's nothing, sir. I can go on." He said, "Show me." And he would make a decision that was in your best interest at that point. He might take you out and might send you to sick bay or whatever. But it was constant demonstration of leadership and care about the person. As a matter of fact, there is a free book that you can get, which is the Marine Leadership Principles. And if you have trouble finding it, let me know. I'll put you exactly on it. But I learned to take care of people. I learned to be concerned about people. I also learned that the mission does matter. It does come first. I also learned that the other thing was teamwork. Very early in boot camp, I'm very early, day one, the drill instructors would catch someone doing something wrong. They'd call everybody together in formation, which we barely knew how to do. And then they would announce who the person was and what they did wrong. And then they would let that person sit down, and they would take the rest of us to the beach, make us run into the ocean. This was San Diego. Make us run into the ocean in our clothing, come back, and then do sand crabs and cover ourselves completely with sand, and then go spend the rest of the day in sand-filled clothing. And the one guy who was the perpetrator didn't get it. So pretty soon, everybody caught on that if one person messes up, it endangers everybody else, that everybody has a role. So how can you use this in this time of, well, I think, Kevin, it was one of your friends. I don't know who mentioned it on the first meeting back with Alvin Law that Derek had. But he said something very profound, and I thought about it. He said, "We have left the time of disruption, and we have entered the age of transformation." With what's going on right now, if you are a manager or a leader, the number one thing that people want is that you know a way forward. There is a way forward. There might be detours, but there is a way forward, and that they can play a part in it. And that's just been very important. In the Marine Corps, it was very clear that we had a part. Every part mattered. And it also was very clear that the possibility existed that you would have to play somebody else's part. Let's just put it that way. You might be the next man up. So that was kind of interesting. Long answer, Derek. I hope you got something out of it.
No, that's great, Tim. Tim, you did tell me the most dangerous time was in riots in Detroit. How did you handle that? Just in 30 seconds before we move.
Yeah, that was a situation where 1967, there was a lot of civil disturbance. My neighborhood, something happened. The police raided was an illegal gambling establishment. The people, very hot summer. The people had no air conditioning. They started a riot, and the next thing I know, my neighborhood is burning. Half the houses, many of the houses of my friends are gone, apartments are gone, and the 101st Airborne had to come in, and it was nothing but gunfire. I heard more gunfire in Detroit in 2 weeks than I would hear in 2 months in the Marine Corps. And that is where I first learned the sound of a bullet whizzing past your head. It's if you have experienced it, it's a snap like fingers. And by the way, you do want to hear it, because the one you don't hear is the trouble.
You're in big trouble. You did also tell me that that's one of the issues in America at the moment, that the government's worried about riots with this pandemic. Is that right? Is that something that you?
Oh, that's absolutely true. We're a lot of states want to open up. The President Trump has been pushing to get the economy. The primary reason for that, I still have friends in interesting places, and the primary reason is that they fear that when people run out of money and they become so bored that it will not, it's a very volatile situation, and it will only take one spark. It has happened in other parts of the world. It has already happened in some parts of the US on limited scale. But they really want to get people back to work. Drug abuse is skyrocketing. Spousal abuse is skyrocketing. And it's just been, people need to get back to work. However, the flip side of that, the ambiguity, if you will, and the complexity is, if people go back to work too early, will the virus start up again? Will there be a second wave? So it's tough. It's tough
Tim,
to be a
you
leader.
said, yeah, you said that, you told me yesterday that Trump sent checks out to the poor people, but Walmart had a record day when those checks arrived, with people buying televisions, and you were smoking. Not you were smoking. The smell of marijuana was pretty strong because people had spent those checks immediately on goods and things. And
In certain areas of the country, in certain areas of the city, Walmart ran out of televisions almost instantly.
wow. Yeah. Okay, can we turn to VUCA, which is a leadership technique or a business technique that I hadn't heard of? I did look it up on the internet, but can you just walk that through us and how you teach that and how you use it?
Sure. 5 years ago, I was asked by the Dean of Southern Methodist University to create a course as an instructor that I had been developing called VUCA, V-U-C-A, VUCA Leadership. And it's basically the leadership skills that are required when you have an SHTF scenario, as we say in the military, when it's a stuff hits to the fan scenario. It is actually developed by the War College, the United States War College, and it came about by trying to deal with enemies or insurgencies in the Middle East, where all the bombs and the bullets in the world would not make a difference. Russia learned that in Afghanistan. What needed to be done was a way to face what's called asymmetrical warfare. So they came up with volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous to describe this situation. Well, it described the situation in the Middle East well, but it then came quickly to describe industries in the United States. Now, we don't have the foresight to have the National Health Service, but we do have a healthcare system, an incredibly expensive healthcare system. And it was the first industry that was hit almost with the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situation. The other one that was hit was retail. Amazon started, as we say in Texas, dragging the bacon off of the plate of all of the brick and mortar stores. Pretty soon, a lot more industries got into the VUCA world. The pandemic has literally thrust the entire world, the globe, into a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Think of the decisions that leaders have to make, any country in the world. How volatile is it? Well, that's why we want to get people back into work. What spark could happen? It's uncertain. How long is this going to last? Should we let up? Should we let people go out and stop sheltering in place? And if we do, how will we limit it? Where will we do it? New York still has incredible numbers. Detroit has incredible numbers. California's numbers are fluctuating. So there's very complex decisions, and ambiguity is what's going to happen. Has it peaked in China? Everybody thought it peaked in China, and then this morning they locked down an 11 million populated city because it's starting to hit in the new city. We need certain skills. If you're going to manage in a VUCA environment, the first thing you have to do, I like to use my model called VIVA, V-I-V-A, which means to live, or let's live, to life. The first part of VIVA is you have to have a vision. so that people, A, know where they're going. You have to have compelling vision to drive people forward, because confused people won't move. Confused people will do things, but they won't accomplish. You'll see activity, but you won't see accomplishment without the compelling vision. So what is your vision? That's your map. The second part is the values. How do you, you have to talk about values all the time. What are the values of our organization? What are the values of our government? What are the values of our country? Because the values provide the compass, they provide the rails that you can go on as you go to your vision. The other part of VIVA, the third, is vitality. As I like to tell the managers and the leaders that I train, and by the way, they're all executives, they're not, they're well into their careers, or they're newly into their careers, but they're not college level, they're post-college, post-university. And in vitality, I tell them, I don't care what your industry is. If you work for the National Health Service, if you work in information processing, if you're a manager or a leader, you're in the energy management business. If you think back to the physics definition from high school, it's energy applied to a task equals work. That's classic definition. So what energy do you have? What energy do you exhibit? And you have to use your own energy and the energy of your team or the energy of your organization to get results. However you measure results, what are your core measures? You have to have the vitality. You have to stay in shape. You have to be present. You can be tired, but just don't show tired. And the final VA is valor. I read a lot of studies on leadership. I'm able to do that. And for the past couple of years, one of the number one requirements for effective leadership is courage. I didn't use courage because it didn't fit into the VIVA model. I needed to go with the VA and its valor. But it typically means, do you have the courage to have the conversation that needs to happen? A lot of people avoid that. But if you avoid a difficult conversation, there's one thing that is absolutely certain: the problem will not go away. It may grow, but it will not go away. So we tell people, have the difficult conversation, make the difficult cuts. Managers everywhere have spent the last 3 weeks or longer making very difficult decisions because their survival depended on it. Well, how do you make them when it doesn't depend on it?
Fantastic.
The other thing.
Sorry, Tim, I was just going to interrupt you there because we are almost running out of time. But
I'm sorry.
I'm going to come back to you, but I'm going to ask people to put any questions in the chat box, because there's nothing in there at the moment. And you said you'd take any questions, and so will I if the flip chart doesn't fall on my head behind me. But while they're doing that, I was just going to say, what would you say in 1 minute are the takeaways that we should be passing on to our children or our grandkids now? Because people will ask us what we were doing during this lockdown.
Well, I have a belief that if you look back over your life and see all the things that happened to you that you didn't like, you might find out that things that happened to you actually happened for you. That's not naive. But when I think of my cancer treatment, when I think of marriage that dissolved, when I think of promotions that I didn't get, and what came of that. So I tell people, this didn't happen to you. This happened for you. And I'm extremely optimistic, because this is the one opportunity, the biggest opportunity I've had in my life to have a reset. And I think that the pandemic has given us all an opportunity to reset. Some will take advantage of it, but others won't. So that would be, embrace this opportunity. I know people that have a lot of money that are buying up companies now because they have great fundamentals and no cash. So they're for sale. But they said this has never been a better time to buy companies, buy businesses.
Fantastic, Tim. Thanks very much for that. I'm going to unmute everybody, and then we'll see what questions that we get. But I was thinking yesterday about all the things we talked about with Simon as well, and where all this is going, because I see that the biggest airline in Europe, Ryanair has said its business model won't work and he's not going to fly any of his aircraft if he has to take the middle seat out. I don't see how he's going to get away with that. You know, your Carnival Cruises in the States can't get any US government money because they've never paid any tax, I heard, and they've got 72 cruise ships costing almost £1 billion each. So what are they going to do with that? And that, of course, has a knock-on effect for the banks. And as you know, I was in banking, but it's almost a pack of cards if some of those people fall down, because the debt will be with there'll be debt with the banks and all sorts of things. Branson's asking for a bailout by the UK government, and he hasn't paid a penny in UK tax either. He's kept everything offshore in the British Virgin Islands and etc. So there's a few challenges there for everybody, and I wondered what anybody else thought about that. You're unmuted, but you're only going to get 30 seconds to say something, if that's all right.
Derek, I was just going to pick up on what Tim said at the end there, and looking at the stock market, for example, and Warren Buffett's sort of his view, which is that when people start getting scared, that's the time to get greedy, and vice versa. And, you know, there will be some great stocks out there. And the difficulty, of course, is understanding what the new paradigm is going to look like. It could be so different. As you say, some massive companies could end up failing in all this, but there will definitely be opportunities out there.
Of course, it's picking those opportunities, isn't it, and spotting them. But anybody with huge fixed assets and gearing, Mark and I used to work at Barclays, as Martin did, who's on this call, and I've just been racking my brains, and Tony, I'm racking my brains if I was a credit risk manager, what I'd be agreeing to. I just couldn't get my head round that. But it's interesting, isn't it? Sorry, somebody else wanted to say something there. Tim, you wanted to say something. I think I interrupted you. Perhaps I didn't.
Who?
You, Tim. I thought you were going to say
okay.
Something. Your book
I always
not that good at the moment, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm very much in the Derek Arden class of being a PIDEA, lifelong learning, also known as Philomath. And I'm a very big reader, and I have a very strong recommendation for everyone to read. And the name of the book is called Humility is the New Smart, Rethinking Human Excellence in the Smart Machine Age. We are no longer in the information age. We're in the smart machine age. And the reason, there's lots of reasons I recommend it. It is chock full of insights, but it starts with the university, or Oxford University and Bank of England study that said in the next 10 to 15 years, 47% of the jobs in the United States will disappear because of the smart machines and artificial intelligence. And that's 80 million people. And unlike the industrial age, where we moved from agrarian economy to industrial economy, it took 35 years to come back. There's no sign of these jobs coming back. So, and humility is the new smart, is a way that leaders can be, understanding not humility as meek, but humility as I don't have all the answers. I could be learning things. There's a lot I need to do. It's not about me. Fabulous book.
Tim, can you put that book and the author in the chat box for everybody so that they can pick that up, please? Sure. The second thing is you said you had some sort of file that you could send me that if people wanted it,
yes,
you'd be pleased for us to have a read of it.
Yeah, one of the key things for managers today is to not have all the answers. You can't possibly have all the answers. Your team has. None of us is as smart as all of us. So Derek negotiated something that I give out to my students, and it's very strong questions. There's 99 of them. There's actually 100 of them because I came up with one more. But from some of the smartest people in the world, and they're very strong questions that you could ask the people that work for you, that work with you, that you boss, that you're overseeing. It's questions like, what don't we know that if we did know would make this decision easier? If we were going to start this business again, would we get into this business? What can we do to be not the best company in the UK? What can we do to be the best company for the UK? Because the for is energizing. It gives vitality. So I gave to Derek the 9,900 questions, and if you just send him an email, he will give them to you. And I spent some time taking a look at them. Some are really going to resonate with you. Don't ask more than one at a meeting, though.
Brilliant, Tim. Brilliant. Will you put that in the chat box now? And I'm going to fire a question at Kevin O'Connor, and he's going to hate me for this. If you were the CEO of Boeing, what would you do now?
The CEO of Boeing, what would I do now?
I think they're not going to sell any aircraft for the next 5 years.
Well, I think I would have to get my people together and facilitate a meeting, not about what to do, but facilitating a meeting about who we are. And in other words, instead of having a team meeting, I'd have a meeting about the team. Let's talk about our team. What is it how has this impacted us? What's going on? And give them freedom to be authentically themselves during that meeting. There's no wrong answer. I think Tim would know this. I think the Army or the Air Force has a thing called hot wash, or a after action review.
After action report. I learned from my SEAL buddies. It's a very, very big part. What it looks at is what contributed to the failure, not who messed up.
Right.
It's what contributed. It's not personal. It's process driven.
And it's not based on rank, if I understand it correctly.
Oh, no.
It's all very horizontal. And I think I see a lot of, I'm interviewing a lot of CEOs now for a new book, and all of them talk about the necessity, and maybe this goes along with your humility idea, Tim, of a horizontal relationship with my team instead of a vertical relationship with my team where I'm on top and you're on the bottom. But we are social equals, and your idea might be just as good as my idea. So, yeah.
Well, there's actually a statement about that I teach, and it's command and control is dead. First of all, the millennials won't put up with it. They can't. They don't know how to. So command and control is dead, but connect and collaborate horizontal. We don't need hierarchies. We need wirarchies. Silos are dead. Seamless is alive.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, Kevin.
Well, and I think you said this virus time has been a time for you. What did you call it? A time to something or other, realign yourself. Reset yourself. Yeah. And so I'm no expert on Boeing, but that's what I would do. I would do a reset, and I think we're doing a reset, aren't we? In a sense, we're the ones saying, I'm reconnecting with a guy that started my career in 1970, whatever it is, too, just by chance. And I thought normally I wouldn't have time for that. I'd be in an airplane, blah blah blah. Now I'm saying it's important to schedule with him and talk to him. So I spoke to Roger Dawson the other day, the famous negotiating expert, and because his name came up, I thought I'm going to give Roger a call. Son of a gun, I called him. We had a delightful chat. We used to teach together. And so I think that's something the teams are not doing now. They're scrambling around saying, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? When is this going to be over? When is it going to be over? Instead, I think it's maybe more useful for them to do what you're doing, Tim, which is a reset.
Yeah, you were either going to reset yourself or you will be reset.
I like that. There's some real straight, smart takeaways there. I think I'm going to use them in my briefing on Monday. Guys, we're really almost at the end of the official part of this. Tim, that's been fantastic. I've made lots of notes. I'm going to replay it back again. Command and control. I think people have forgotten that. They've forgotten that command and control is dead, and millennials will not put up with being told what to do. They will want to be. And I know some of you have children, and they're not children, they're 40-year-olds like mine, and they won't be put up with being bossed around and bullied with a structure. They might, I do say to mine, you might lose your job over arguing, but that's probably where I'm coming from. So Tim has put in the chat box, I hope everyone can see that, Humility is the New Smart Something of Excellence in the Smart Age Machine by Edward Hess and Catherine Ludwig. I will look that up on Amazon in a minute. As I said, next week, I've got some fantastic speakers lined up, and I've got a couple for the week after. So if you guys are keen on this, please join me and share it with other people. I get more people clicking in, interestingly enough, the day I send my briefing out, which I suppose is that's straight in their memory. But I'm not sure I can send a reminder out every day, but that's the where it goes. But
hey Derek.
Sorry?
Derek, could I just say one more thing?
Please do.
This VUCA is getting to be a very, very hot topic. And if you would Google VUCA, you're going to get millions of hits. There's some excellent books out there. If you need some information, by the way, VUCA is taught in high school in India. Okay, it's not even, I'm probably the only university instructor teaching it in America, but it's a high school topic. So yeah, please look at this. It'll give you a lot of strategies.
Thanks, Tim. The last thing I was going to say was on the course that I went on in Marco Island, which was fabulous. I first met I went to it, my mentor, Nido Cobain, and Kevin's mentor as well. But Nido gave out 100 $1 bills, $1 bills, and he said to people, you can give each one of those dollar bills away to someone that needs it, but only $1. And taught us really that philanthropy, if you put things out there, they come back, etc. And Kevin, I don't know if you're still on or not, but I think you've come across this.
Yeah, I'm still on. I guess I should start giving that money away, huh?
Have you had any interest on it yet?
I was going to go to Walmart and get some toilet paper.
Or some weed.
They were all the dollar bills too. Were not just they were all brand new, and they were all like in a memo pad, so you had to tear them off.
You had them in a pad, yeah.
Yeah.
You might know this, Derek. You might know Kevin too, but this Nido Cobain is certainly somebody that is fascinating. He gives away not 10%, 20% of his net worth every 5 years. He gives it away. He turns it into cash or gifts. And he said, every 5 years, I got more to give away.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating human being.
Yeah. And he was asked by the president of the United States, the one before last, because he's a Republican, isn't he, Nido? They're all Republicans in North Carolina, I think, from what to be as one of his advisors. He turned that down. He's grown the university at High Point to a phenomenal session. Duncan Brody asks, could I do a more detailed interview with Tim on my podcast, as he shared some great tips and could share more in a longer interview? So there's a fantastic credibility for you, Tim, and we'll do that by all means if you're up for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Please understand, I have Irish ancestry, so talking, it comes natural.
Oh, not you and Kevin O'Connor. Gee whiz, have we got half the Irish, and we got Martin Kidd grinning at us there, who is of course Irish. I have to put up with all this Irish blarney all the time. I had a PA in Barclays, a lady called Helen, who was as Irish as they could be. The most fantastic PA I've ever had, and all good fun. Anyway, guys, I'm going to turn the recording off.
One last thing.
Stay on the line as long as possible. Tim, last word from you?
Well, the only thing is I was in Dublin once, and a guy in a pub looked at me and says, son, you did not just kiss the Blarney Stone. By God, you took a bite out of it.
Fantastic, guys. I'm going to stop the recording. Then I'm going to ask Martin to tell one of his favourite Irish stories. And he's got in 2 minutes, Martin, because he's got too many of them. Recording stopping now.